So this was a totally new kind of thing for us. It wasn't a new thing for food, but or for cooking, because for 2,000 years that's how it was done. You had to get beef from the beef guy and bread from the bread guy, and you had to go to a different person for everything, and specialized in growing that in your community or in your food shed. And so we were kind of just relearning how to operate a restaurant, and in which you can't make a phone call and get a case of steaks the next day. And it took us a good 5 years to get to that point, and of setting it up, of figuring out the system, of saying, all right, right now it's March, we had a really cold winter, and we've had a ton of rain, so nobody's been able to get in the field, so there's no spring stuff right now. But it's also warm enough that all the winter stuff that was put up is now gone. It's kind of, if it wasn't eaten already, it's softened up, it's destroyed, we can't use it. So we really have, right now we have 8 things to use produce-wise that we can actually use locally. So we have a lot of the same thing. Makes creativity fun. And then, and meat, pork, beef, things like that, we started using whole animal, because it was the only way to ensure that we could get product all the time. So we do something that's called nose to tail cookery, and we literally get in, and if you get on the Tayst Restaurant Facebook page, we like to put up all the pictures, but we get in whole animals on everything except cattle, although that's coming. And so our last pig was only 250 pounds, but the one before that was 450, and it was the size of this table and twice as big as me, and it was monstrous. And so we had to kind of be creative in how we do that, but we also had to plan on how long is that pig going to take to grow, when is it going to be ready, when are we going to need pork, do we have parties coming at that point, and and it really became this give and take of teaching our customers to understand that they could not come in and get pork loin every Thursday the same way, because there's only 2 pork loins on a pig. So out of that 450 pounds, my pork loin's maybe 20 pounds of that, and I've got 40 orders. And once 40 orders is gone, it's gone, but then I've got 200 more orders for the rest of the pig. And we have to go through all of that. So we started doing kind of a rotation on our menu where we just list pork and we just list steak, and we vary the cut depending on what we can get and what we have. Or we have lamb, and we use the whole thing. So we're becoming creative in how to, not just use the whole animal, but educate our customers and make our dishes enticing enough, especially being in Nashville, where you have this kind of mix of funky, cool, want to eat good food, and still like their meat and potatoes, and don't really want to vary that much. And we kind of try to ride this line in there. So we really established our local infrastructure and made ourselves successful in being able to source everything locally. Right now we're probably 95% local food, even during the winter, which is pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited about that. But where did that bring me to the green thing? So why did we decide to go there? So as I started talking to these farmers, probably the best part about starting to ask questions and figure out where the food came from, and going to these other markets where they weren't getting stuff from the produce auction. They're growing their own stuff, they're bringing it, they're producer-only markets, was learning out why they were farming the way they farmed. So why do they farm organically? Why do they use, don't use chemicals, don't use pesticides, no fertilizers, they don't use GMO stuff. They use a form of farming called polyculture farming, and where they're rotating crops, rotating animals on after the crops go in, and it's this kind of cyclical growing technique that again was around for 2,000 years before we centralized everything and made it industrial. And I realized that this is a sustainable way of farming, and it's the way they choose to farm because they're family farmers and they want their farm to be successful for years to come. So most farmers grow in saying, I want to go be a farmer. I don't really like people for a lot of them, so I'm going to get off to the light that I don't have to deal with them too much. And that is the irony of the new organic thing, is now they have to get face-to-face with people again. But and I want to have a land for my kids. So when my kids grow up, they have somewhere to kind of move into. And they've got a farm, they've got a career that they can step into that's going to be profitable for them. And so they don't do things that are going to affect the land in a negative manner. They don't destroy the soil, which is what industrial farming does. And they really focus on what's called a regenerative farming system, in which as they farm, they're actually improving the soil. And everybody see Food Inc? I'm assuming if they're all in here, they saw it. So Joel Salatin on Food Inc, the really boisterous farmer with a cool hat on Polyface Farms in Virginia. A neat story about him is, and I think it was written in On the Bourse Limbe, Michael Pollan wrote about it, but he went back to his farm that was an industrial farm for a long time and took it back over and really started pushing this polyculture form of farming. And all the farms around him are industrial farms. And after 10, 15, 20 years, he actually increased the soil and the quality of the soil so much that there is a drop-off from his farm to all the farms around him on the fence line of 6 to 9 inches or something like that. So, his form of farming was so beneficial that he added topsoil to his ground. And just in 20 or 30 years, which is, it's pretty, I think that's pretty neat. And so, we started looking at the sustainable thing, and the real basic example: organic vegetables, no pesticides, no fertilizers, all that good stuff. And you have industrial vegetables, which really there's only, 3: corn, soy. Maybe there's 2. There's only 2: corn and soy, really. Wheat, I guess. But corn, 54% of corn is used for animal feed. And what's actually 44% goes direct to animals, and then 10% is an ethanol byproduct that goes back to it. But 54% of all the corn we grow in our country goes back to feeding cows in our meat system, which brings us to meat land. Anybody seen pictures of CAFOs? Nasty, long, miles, almost not really, but big yards full of nothing but meat, standing in their own excrement. What do you say in school? I'm trying not to use my cook language. And the thing about packing that many animals together is, especially standing in is that the only way to keep them from getting sick is by pumping them full of hormones and antibiotics. And 80% of the antibiotics produced in our country goes to animal husbandry. I mean, that's a lot. So we just 20% for when we get sick. And the downside to that, which of course now we know is, and what we're seeing on the vegetable plots as well, is the amount of fertilizer, the amount of antibiotics being used, we are getting resistant strains. So in a cow, for instance, we're pumping them full of antibiotics, but it's attacking everything except maybe one virus or one bug that's actually getting stronger because it resists it and doesn't have any competition. So all the other all the other bacteria and little critters and things that are going to kill us are killed by the antibiotics, but there's one that makes it. And we're developing these super strains of viruses that we're starting to see in hospitals that antibiotics can't fix. Staph being a big one that's going around right now. And there's super weeds at the same time going on in the fields where the answer is spray more. But at some point you can't saturate the land any more than that, and you're getting these super weeds up there, and they're just so you're getting back to the whole reason you started spraying, and it's not functioning. The other thing about meat and animal husbandry is it brings us back to climate change. 1/5 of the greenhouse gases in our country is from animal production in the industrial system. And that's what that was a livestock report from the UN a few years back. But it really only concentrated on the animals. It didn't concentrate going back to the corn growth. So 54% of corn goes to animals. We're spraying corn with nitrogen fertilizer, and nitrous oxide is 4 times more powerful in greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So, and it's getting released into the atmosphere. So we're, is that 1/5 accurate? Is it accurate only for a certain part? Or are we really doing much more damage to climate change by the way we grow that food? And the simple answer to that is grass-fed beef. And it's an easy one. There's more and more farms going out there. It's obviously what we use. Grass-fed, start to finish. That's what they're meant to eat. That's what they like to eat. You know, they still get nice and fatty. You still see a little specks in there. And if a good farmer does it right and alternates his grasses and supplements with hay at the right period of time, you can get a grass-fed steak that you can't tell the difference to from the corn-fed steak tenderness-wise. But you will tell the difference flavor-wise because it will actually have flavor. It won't taste like corn fat or corn syrup or whatever you want to call it. Or is it corn sugar now, right? It's no longer corn syrup, it's corn sugar. It's good for you. Obviously, the industrial beef production, the animal production, really heavy on fossil fuel use. I think the number out there is 296 gallons of oil to get 1 cow to market. So that's 5.5 barrels of oil to get one cow to market. 1 cow. And we're growing, God, I think last year's number on cows was in the billion. A billion cows last year. It's really astronomical. It's crazy. Crazy numbers of beef going on out there right now. And pork and everything else. The industrial farms are growing at ridiculous rates. And now we're seeing hog farms with 10,000 hogs in a shelter. We're seeing chicken farms with 750,000 chickens on one thing, and this is turning over in chickens are turning over in 45 days. You know, it's the super nugget chicken or whatever, but 45 days from start to finish, and there's 750,000 at a time. And that's just, to me, it's insane. And obviously, as we talked about with you, the antibiotics, we have massive food safety issues, and a lot of that. Even with our fabulous regulations that we have and USDA, the FDA, and everybody checking on them, is they're still getting through. Well, that's because we're importing most of our food. And the other countries we get our food from, they don't have regulations, they don't have inspectors, they don't have people going out there and checking. And then it brings us to fish, which is the other big part of restaurant world. Again, I grew up in an island, so I like fish. 70 to 80% of the world fish stocks are in jeopardy. And in the last 100 years, we are at 1/6 of the fish population we were 100 years ago. 90% of large fish, sharks, whales, tuna, the big delicious guys are gone. And of that 80% of those fish stocks, 50% are fully exploited, meaning they're right on the verge, and 24 to 32, depending on which site you look at, or which group, Monterey Bay or World Health Organization, whatever. So 24 to 32% are overexploited or completely depleted, meaning they're on the verge of extinction. And we're still fishing at the rate that we used to. So like farming, like agricultural farming, we are subsidizing fishing fleets in this country that are 2.5 times the size that they need to be to get the same amount of fish. And but we don't want to collapse the small fishermen, just like the small farmer. We want to keep them up, we want to keep them going. So we're subsidizing not quite as much money, but almost as much as agricultural subsidies. I don't have the exact number. And that's a pretty scary thought that we're looking at that much depletion, and this is really in the last 100 years, and we'll go into the reasons why in a second, but we're facing total fish depletion by basically 2050 to where we're not going to get fish out of the ocean. And I've